Welcome. So in this part of the lesson, we're going to be talking about divisibility tests. So the question before us says, use divisibility tests to decide if the number 522 is divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, or 10. Let's just stop for a second and talk about what it means for something to be divisible. Could you grab your pen for me and write down the following? So for the first one here, we're asking ourselves, is 522 divisible by 2? That's what we're asking. Is 522 divisible by 2? Another way of saying that, so another way of saying the same thing is saying, is 2 a factor of 522? Both of these statements are saying the same thing. In other words, can I put 2 into 522 and get no remainders out? That's what it's saying. So you just have to be comfortable with this idea that divisibility tests is the same thing as finding out whether something is a factor of something else. I know there's a lot of words there, but you just need to be aware of that relationship. Okay, so in this column on the right-hand side here, you have the divisibility tests. So you don't have to copy them down or anything. They're all here for you. So for 2, a number is divisible by 2 if it ends with the digits 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8. So you probably already know this one. If a number ends in an even number, we can therefore say that it's divisible by 2. So for example, 384, well, it ends with a 4, and 4 is an even number, so therefore 384 is going to be divisible by 2. Or you could say 2 is a factor of 384. So that's what it's looking at. You're looking at that final digit. So that means for our number, which is 522, let's write it down, 522. I'm going to be looking at that final digit, which is 2. 2 is an even number, so therefore 522 is going to be divisible by 2. So yes. Now, if we wanted to take the long way of figuring out whether or not it is divisible, now we don't like doing this, but if we had to, what we would do is this. Would actually perform the division. How many times does 2 go into 5? It goes in twice with one remainder. How many times does 2 go into 12? It goes in 6 perfectly, and then 2 goes into 2 once. And as you can see, I don't get any remainders out, which means that we are correct in thinking, yes, our divisibility test worked. We didn't get any remainders out. We get a whole number out. All right, let's now go through our next one, which is the divisibility of 3. So a number is divisible by 3 if the sum of all the digits is divisible by 3. So this one is actually pretty cool. I think you'll be impressed by it. So if the sum of all the digits is divisible by 3. So in other words, so for example, if I have 162 and I plus them all together, so 1 plus 6 plus 2, that equals 9. And because 9 is divisible by 3, that means the entire number here, 162, is divisible by 3. I don't know about you, but that's pretty cool. So that means for our example here, what we're going to do is we're going to take the digits of 522. So 5 plus 2 is 7, plus 2 is equal to 9. And then we can say, because 9 is divisible, that's not how you spell divisible, is divisible by 3, 522 is divisible by 3. So because the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, the number itself is divisible by 3. Once again, pretty cool. So let's write down yes for this one. 522 is divisible by 3. Remember, we've got the old-fashioned way of doing this, which, we don't like to do, but we can. It's always an option to us. And that is, we can go 3, then we can go 5, 2, 2. 3 goes into 5 once with 2 left over. 3 goes into 22 7 times with 1 left over, and 3 goes into 12 4 times. So our answer would be 174. It's a whole number. It's perfect. It's what we expect. It worked. Our divisibility test worked. Hooray. Next one. This is going to be the divisibility test for 4. So 4, if the number formed by the last 2 digits is divisible by 4. So for example here, if we have 148, well, here's 48. And because 48 is divisible by 4, that means the entire thing is divisible by 4. So 148 is divisible by 4 because the number formed by the last two digits, 48, is divisible by 4. So let's go through this again with our example now. So I have 522, that's the number that I'm starting with. And the divisibility test for 4 tells me that these last two digits here, this 22, well, because 22 isn't divisible by 4, 522 isn't going to be divisible by 4. So because 22 is not divisible by 4, the number itself, so 522, is not divisible by 4. And now we can, so let's write no. Let's write no first. It's not going to have ourselves, no. And if we wanted to check our good old-fashioned way of doing it, just to be 100% sure, but our divisibility test obviously works, but let's just do it for fun. So we've got 4, we have 5, 2, 2. 4 goes into 5 once, 1 left over. 4 goes into 12 3 times. It goes in perfectly, none are left over. How many times does 4 go into 2? Well, it doesn't. I have to carry that 2 over. 4 goes into 25 times. So that means my answer is going to be 130.5. And as you can see, because I got a decimal out, that means that our test worked. Because we said no. So everything worked there. Okay. The next one is really easy. So we'll go through this one a bit quicker. The next one is 5. And for 5, you probably already know this. If the digit ends in 0 or 5, it's divisible by 5. So for example, here are some examples here that we can look at. This one ends in 5, so that means 145 is divisible by 5. This one ends in 0, which means the whole number is divisible by 5. So if it ends in 0 or 5, it's divisible by 5. Now, our question is 522. 522 does not end in 0 or 5, so the answer is no, it is not divisible by 5. Let's go on from that one. That's a pretty easy one. What about 6? 6 is a bit different. 6 is 2 tests in 1, believe it or not. So 6, so a number is divisible by 6 if it is divisible by both 2 and 3. So for example, 456. Well, it ends in an even number, so that means it is divisible by 2. And if I go 4 plus 5 plus 6, that's equal to 15. And 15 is divisible by 3. So that means it's also divisible by 3. So that means it's divisible by 6. So it has to pass 2 tests to figure out if it's divisible by 6. So let's go through our 2 tests here. So we have 522. So we can go test for 2. Well, it ends in an even. So that means it passes the test for 2, and the test for 3, we've already done this before, but 5 plus 2 plus 2 is equal to 9. 9 is divisible by 3, so yes, it is divisible by 3 as well. So because it passes both the test for 2 and 3, that means it's also divisible for 6. So our answer is yes. And if we were to do our old-fashioned division, we would find that we don't get a decimal. Now we come to our next one, which is 8, and you'll find that the test for 8 sometimes isn't that helpful. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. A number is divisible by 8 if the number formed from the last 3 digits is divisible by 8. So for example, this number right here, the last 3 digits are 112, and 112 is divisible by 8, so that means 2,122 is divisible by 8. Now, the reason why it's not that helpful sometimes is, for our example, if I gave you 522, what are the last 3 digits? Well, the last 3 digits are 522. So that means we're just left in the position where we have to just do it the old-fashioned way, which is fine. We can do it the old-fashioned way, like this. You know, it's a bit time-consuming, and it's a bit difficult sometimes, but it isn't that bad. Okay, so how many times does 8 go into 5? It doesn't. So that means I carry the 5 across. How many times does 8 go into 52? Well, it's going to go in 6 times because that's 48, which means I have 4 left over because that's the difference between 48 and 52. How many times does 8 going to 42, well, that's going to be 5 times because 8 5s are 40. That leaves me with 2 here. How many times is 8 going to 20? Well, that's going to be 2 because 8 2s are 16. That leaves me with 4. How many times is 8 going to 40? 8 goes into 45 times. So my answer is going to be 65.25. That took some time and it was a little bit tricky, I suppose. But as soon as I saw that I was getting decimals out, so I didn't have to actually find the decimals. I could have just said, hey, I'm getting decimals out here. This clearly is not going to be divisible by 8. Perfect. Let's go into our next one, which is 9. So a number is divisible by 9 if the sum of all the digits is divisible by 9. So this is very much like our 3 example. So for instance here, 3, 8, 4, 3, when you add them all together, you get 18. And 18 is divisible by 9, so it checks out. So you check whether or not something is divisible by 9 if you can add them all together, and then that number is divisible by 9. So we have 522. If we add those all together, we know we're going to get 9 out. And 9 is divisible by 9. So that means yes, it checks out. Yes, if I was to do the long division, which I don't want to do, but if I were to do it, it would work. I wouldn't get a decimal. So the answer is yes for that one. And then the final one. The final one is very easy. It's the divisibility test for 10. And it's basically if it ends in 0. So if the number ends in 0, you know it's going to be divisible by 10. That's one you probably already knew. So if I have 522, 522, that doesn't end in 0. So the answer is no. No. Note there is no simple test for the divisibility of 7. So if you did want to find whether something was divisible by 7, what would you have to do? You'd have to do it the old-fashioned division way, which is fine. You can do that and check if it has any decimals. And that's it. So a lot there on divisibility tests. Hopefully you found this useful, and hopefully you're grateful that, you know, all of it is written down there for you for your later reference. Hopefully you found this useful, and I will see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.